All right, guys, welcome back to the Always Free podcast, the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. And this is my new studio. This is the Always Free studio, which has been something we've been building for the last couple of months, and really excited to be back each and every week. I'm going to be delivering this podcast to you, and it will be available on all the platforms. So if you've listened in the past and you said, what's happened to the podcast? I appreciate you. Appreciate if you being patient for me bringing this back. And over the last, few weeks, few months even, I've been just observing certain things that have been going on. We've managed to get our YouTube channel to over 400,000 subscribers. My book's coming out finally in May. We've had lots of great success. I've been asked to speak on different stages over 2024. And one of the things that I get, one of the things that I got asked today, actually, in my live session earlier was if you could do something differently. And they were specifically talking about the podcast, right? And they said, like, if you could do something differently, what would it be? So I know when I start mine. And I said, like, you just have to do the things that you know you have to do. And believe it or not, that seems to be the hardest stumbling block. It's like, one of the great things about having or generating quite a large online following, particularly on YouTube, is we get bombarded because obviously the YouTube's one thing, but out the back of that, they go through different email communications and they're in our ecosystem in our world of newsletters and all that kind of stuff. And they listen to the podcast. And because of that, we get asked a lot of questions. So we get bombarded through all the different channels, emails and messages and DMs every day on different messages, different concerns, different questions, different objections, different limiting beliefs. And one of the best things about doing that, having that inbound kind of feedback, if you like, or data, is you start to see the common things. You start to see the common gremlins, the common problems, the common things, and it's not that many, right? Everyone thinks that it's so complex. You're in it on your own. You got a real struggle ahead of you. It's so complex. There's loads going on. There's loads of things stopping you from getting to where you want to be. But in actual fact, there's hardly anything. It's like 5 or 6 things, usually. And that's what we see. We see 5 or 6 different problems that come up over and over and over again. And it's always the same things, right? But here's the answer, right? So this particular guy said, like, if you started your podcast again, what would you do differently? And I said, nothing, because I just started it. I did it. And I got my phone out and I said, my original podcast for the first, 50 episodes or something, were all recorded on the voice notes on my phone. And I flipped out my voice notes, went back to 2019. I played one from July and it was episode 18 or 19. And I proved it to them. And the thing is, everyone really knows what they've got to do. Everyone knows what they've got to do. And what I see, one of the biggest problems is, people seem to want to buy the next course, buy the next program, read the next podcast, read the next book, listen to the next podcast, watch the next YouTube video. And in actual fact, that doesn't usually take you to where you want to go. They say the more you learn, the more you earn. That's only true if you actually apply what you're learning, if you do the action steps. So for most of the time, there's going to be one mentor or a couple of mentors that you have the results that you want. Your job then is just to kind of listen to them, right, and get sense checked from them, but do the work you know you have to do. There's no other secrets outside of that, right? Which came back to the next thing was, we want to do that as quickly as possible, right? We've all got this idea of a dream life. And if you've got a dream life in your head, you want to get there and enjoy as much of your life living that dream life, right? So I think of it this way. We've usually got the ability to learn new things that are going to take us, if we take the actions towards where we want to go, is from kind of 15, 16 years old, right? My son's learning a lot of skills. Both of my sons are learning valuable skills right now that are actually, they're doing the work and it's moving them forward. But about 15, 16, up to about 70 years old, right? Which means you've got 54, 55 years of basically living your dream life. Okay. Now, it's not going to happen on the first year. It's probably not going to happen on the second year. But if you think about it in terms of that timeline, we've only got a short timeline, and the quicker we can get there, the better, right? So think of this. Your job really is to learn as quickly as possible the things you need to learn, and then take the actions, right, as quickly as possible to get there, so that you can spend as much of that little timeline living your best life. So for me, I've always been of the opinion that I want to find someone who's done what I want, and I want to pay them as much as I can possibly afford to get that information and those action steps so I can copy them. So my priority has always been on my biggest spend, my most highest priority, biggest value spend has been on trying to learn education, like paying a mentor and getting that information so I can quickly reduce that time it takes to get to where I want to be and live as much of my life at the end, like the end result of where I'm content and where I'm comfortable, right? So most people don't do that. Most people, they spend money on education and courses and programs and all this kind of stuff, but it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they're making progress, but they're actually not doing the work. I've seen this time and time again. I sat down and wrote a 5,000 word email newsletter, which then became this very podcast, and every Sunday for 86 Sundays, I wrote 5,000 words. And if you read all of that and done all of the action steps, you would have a phenomenal life. You would have a phenomenal life because I started writing that in 2018. Okay. And it's now 2025. That was 7 years ago, right? 7 years ago. You can transform your life in 5 years, 3.5 to 5 years. You really can. So if you'd just done all the work in those newsletters, by now you would have a phenomenal life. Okay. But I worked out that actually from those newsletters, about 18 people out of the 5,000 at the time that were reading the newsletter, about 18 people were doing the action steps. And the reason being is because if you take out 10% of the people that actually read to the end, or there was about a 36% open rate, and then you take out those people who read to the end, about 10% of those, they read to the end, and then 10% of the people actually went and done the action steps, and 10% of the people probably got results because they did it right. And when you whittle it down, there's like 18 people, something like that at the end of it, actually going and getting the results from out of 5,000 people. Okay. So when the question came up about, doing my podcast, would you do anything differently? The answer is no, because I actually did it. I recorded it and posted it. I didn't wait for the new mic to come or the perfect lighting or the perfect thing. I just knew what I had to do. Everyone knows what they have to do, really. Okay. So as long as you've got a mentor saying you need to do this, this, and this, and then you go, I know, right? Okay. I now know what I've got to do. That's all you've got to do. There's no other secret. There's no other secret sauce, something you're missing. It is just do that. And I think the reason most people don't get the results is because they don't take the action. They don't take the action. Okay. Now, here's a beautiful thing about what happens when you do. You take a step, you get outside of your comfort zone. You might have to dig deep a little bit, right? And you go for it. And you make a little bit of progress, and that progress, that little bit of progress that you've made, that first step that you've made, will filter back a feedback that is positive. It will be, I did this and I got this result. And whether that's you've been to the gym for a bit, you've tried to communicate better with a partner, or whether you've started a business and you've taken those first steps, whatever it might be, that first step is going to feed back positive results to you because you will get progress. You will either learn a lesson, which you can adapt and get better from, or it will move the needle forward, which is a bonus, right? Which I wouldn't even expect to do on the first step. But that's the belief cycle, right? You take an action, the action gets a result. That result feeds back into you as a new belief that if you carry on and continue doing these set actions that are set out to you, you will yield the result that you want. It's inevitable. So I guess really the first step back into this podcast, what the point I wanted to get across was I've sat back and reevaluated a lot of stuff over the last few months, and it's all about action taking. You know, you have got a short life and you've got this idea of what a dream life looks like. Your job is to get to that so as quickly as possible, and you should prioritize whatever it costs to get there as quickly as possible without being stupid, you know, and then live as much of your life in that environment, in that situation, right? And that is it. So I guess the message for this podcast is if you're procrastinating or you're thinking, you keep putting things off, or you're dreaming of being who you want to be, but you're not actually doing the action steps, stop buying books, stop buying programs, stop buying courses, stop buying, because you probably, if you're watching this, you've probably done enough self-development now to know what you've got to do. You know a mentor, they've told you their secret 6 steps, or they've told you their 5-step process. That is true. You need to do what they say. Okay? There's nothing else. There's no amount of, if I buy that part or that other thing, it's going to help me even more. It won't. I promise you that. So I know this has been a bit of a rant on my first time back for a while, but I wanted to just start there. I wanted to rein it back in and give you guys a little bit of a attaboy, you know, a motivation, a kick up the butt, if you like, because 2025 is here. Time is not going backwards. If you want to be who you really want to be and you want to live the life that's most inspiring to you, now is the time we need to do that. Now's the year. We can't waste any more time. We don't want to waste any more time, right? We're a quarter of the way through this century. And I remember I remember the millennium, you know, the millennium bug. It was like, it seems like yesterday. Honestly, we're now a quarter of a way through this century. 7 years since I launched the podcast. 7 years since I launched the newsletter. 6 years since I launched the podcast, right? All of this information's there. If the only reason that you haven't got the results that you want is because you haven't taken the action steps. You haven't done it. And I think admitting that to yourself is important. And from this day on, I want you guys to let me know that you're all in on this. You know, this is the year for you. I want you guys to commit to this, because why listen to this? You know, why listen to this podcast? So I want to thank you for tuning in for episode 1 of this season. And we've got some phenomenal ideas for this podcast. We're going to have guests. We're going to have great conversations on here each and every week. So make sure you subscribe to this if you're not already. And until next time, take care. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you then.